and welcome to the 360 Method, a weekly podcast where we talk about everything Autism 360. I'm your host, Ella Bailey, and every week I'm going to be catching you up with what's going on in the program, chatting with team members, getting in cool guests, and talking about all things mindset, as well as exploring relevant ideas that autism parents think about. Today, we are talking about books, ones I recommend, what I think have helped families, and why I think that exhausted parents should take the time to read these particular books. So, like I said, my name's Ella. I'm an Autism 360 veteran coach. I'm just about to celebrate my third Autism 360 birthday. I've nearly been with the company 3 years, so I'm super excited about that, and I'll be expecting balloons before becoming an Autism 360 team member. I worked in psychological research and in behavioral psychology. So welcome to you, our lovely listeners. We care about you, we care about your thoughts, and whether you're a program member or not, we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to drop us a line at hello@autism360.com. We love listener feedback, and we've been answering a few of your questions live on the podcast, both myself and my guests. So if you've got a question that you would like answered or that you think would be relevant for other parents to hear a discussion about, then please do send that in. We love to hear from you. So before we get started, I do just want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land I live and work, and from where this podcast is being broadcast today, and acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging. I also want to say that this podcast does not substitute for medical advice. If you have concerns about yourself or about somebody you love, please do get in contact with your medical or allied health professional. So let's get started. I've got 3 books that I'm excited to chat with you about today. And they're all different, and they all have a different role to play, I feel, in the development of parents and carers who have somebody with autism in their care. I think it can be really tricky to scrape together the time and the energy to read a book when you are stretched thin. You've got a lot on your plate, you've got a lot on your mind. And so something that I really want to advocate for is audiobooks. So when I say read, I mean that in a totally inclusive way. People who are vision impaired, use audiobooks, and that's still reading. So listening to an audiobook is still reading, and you still get the benefits of what that author has to share. So I want to advocate for, if reading is something that you find really tricky, that you feel like you can't concentrate on, or you've got too much going on in your mind, we have all been there. And so I really want to advocate for audiobooks. So 2 of the books that I have today are in hard copy, and one of them that I have to share is an audiobook that I listen to. So let's get started. The first one that I want to mention today is this battered old number here. You can see it's been well loved. And this one is Atomic Habits. So it's quite well known. The author James Clear has written a number of books, but this is his kind of seminal text. And the reason that I think that Atomic Habits is such an important one for our parents is because the major differences and changes that happen in your child's life aren't, you know, a brand new amazing therapist necessarily that comes in and, you know, sweeps everybody off their feet. They are the small daily changes that we incrementally include into our routines that change the game on how our child feels about their world, about how they engage with their everyday tasks, and about how they increase their functional capacity day by day. And those things are habits. It's about changing your habits as a family, changing your habits as a parent or a carer to support your child in the way that they need to be supported. And so that requires small, consistent changes enacted on a daily basis that compound on each other. And that's exactly what this book teaches you to do. This book has nothing to do with parenting necessarily. It's not written for parents about parenting. It's not written about autism. What it is written about is how to change your life, or the way that you're engaging with a project that you're working on, or the way that you are intentional about the actions that you take every day. And that's what it takes to change your parenting. That's what it takes to change the way that you engage with an autistic person that you live with or care for, in a way that's meaningful and lasting. So that's why I feel like this book has been truly formative for some of the families that I've worked with. One of the families that I've worked with, the mum that I was working with read this one. We'll call her Maria. And Maria listened to this in audiobook, and she was really taken with one of the stories in this book that's about, they use the example of the Japanese railway system and how they have used at overcoming, how they've used this particular system to overcome safety concerns that were coming up in their railway system, to bring down their, safety accidents percentages to nearly zero. They've had amazing success with this. And what they do is that they use a point and call system to make sure that they're communicating to everybody on the platform, everybody on the train. This is what's happening. They point at whatever is happening, and then they use vocals to call it out. Right. So Maria was using this story, reading this story in Atomic Habits, and she realized the power of using the point and call it method in her own home to communicate to her family and to be intentional about what she was doing in each moment. So for example, she needed to communicate to her family, I'm putting on the dishwasher, for example. She points it and she calls it. All her kiddos, including her autistic kiddo, have been purposefully and intentionally communicated, and they know exactly what's going on with that. And I'm sure that there was, lots of different applicable ways that she put that into practice after reading this book. But it just drove home to me how relevant something like this can be for our families who are trying to change the long-term trajectory of their development as a family unit and the development of their child with autism. So that's my first suggestion, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I've also listened to it on audiobook, but I love to highlight. I find that really helpful to keep me concentrating. So the second book that I'd like to suggest, I don't have here, I don't have a physical copy of it. I've listened to it on audio, on Audible, but it's called Forever Boy, and it's by an author called Kate Swenson. So Kate Swenson is, she's a blogger. She has a Facebook group. She is kind of an internet presence, just sharing the experiences of what her experience of raising her family and her son with severe non-speaking autism has been like for her. And what I like about Kate Swenson, and specifically about her book Forever Boy, which I think is quite new, I don't think it's come out all that long ago, is that it's such a hopeful story. She by no means is sugarcoating the struggles. She by no means is trying to say, my son doesn't have areas that that he needs support with, or that we're trying to help him build skills with, or that we need to push him, or those kinds of things. She's not trying to sugarcoat that. What she is trying to do is to reframe the role that parental expectations play in how we view the success and the outcome of both our lives and our children's lives. And I love that she is really raw and really honest, and doesn't beat around the bush in terms of explaining her worries and her fears about the future. But also she doesn't hold back from sharing how she has worked through the role that her own expectations have played in the pain that she felt around her son's future. And so she talks about this process of coming to terms with, actually, how can I reclaim this and find joy in what I do have? How can I reclaim what my son's future is going to look like, our relationship, the strengths that he has, the beautiful skills that he is developing? How can I reclaim that and start to find joy in that instead of feeling pain about the ways that it might not look? And so I love that about this particular book, and about Kate Swenson in general. She really has a lot of balance, a lot of grace for the grief that people might be feeling, but also a roadmap for how you can turn that into something that serves you, turn that into something that helps you build something that you want for your family and for that person in your life who is autistic. So the last book that I wanted to recommend is something that I've been reading far more recently, and it is this. It is The Confident Mind. It is a book about building confidence. It's a book about understanding why confidence is a struggle, and it's a book that is really applicable in terms of practical tools, practical strategies, exercise suggestions on how both us and us with our children can build confidence. And the reason that I think this is so important for parents of autistic kids, being neurodiverse in a neurotypical world is devastating to somebody's confidence. The world doesn't necessarily tell you belong, we want you here. When the world is set up for people who aren't you, and you don't see yourself reflected in media, you don't see your needs being automatically met by society, the toll that takes on somebody's confidence can be really devastating. And I think if we aren't aware of that, and if we aren't aware of ways that we can counteract that, then the toll that it's going to take on the self-confidence, the self-esteem of our kids and of our families more broadly, ourselves, our spouses, is going to have a really widespread effect. And this book really marries together a little bit of neuroscience as well as some really practical kind of cognitive behavioral techniques to counteract the negative bias that we have in our memory encoding system that makes humanity remember the negative as opposed to the positive. And you'll be able to, if you think back, you'll be able to recognize this in your own life. It's much easier to remember the time you, fell on your face in front of the class than the time that you did moderately well at a speech one time. And there are research shows that there are fairly good evolutionary reasons why there should be a negative bias in our memory encoding. But what it doesn't do is serve us in terms of the confidence that we can build. And so I feel like if your child or your autistic child is struggling with confidence, if you don't know how to help them build that up, this is the book for you. The Confident Mind by Dr. Nate Zinzer. And it has a really good downloadable PDF that comes with it that has instructions for how you can walk through a bunch of different exercises to help build up what he calls your mental bank account of memories that you use to inform how you feel about your capacity to complete a task. And so I find, as parents of autistic kids, of neurodiverse kids, we have to be really intentional about protecting their confidence and protecting our own confidence, making sure that we're remembering, X, Y, and Z time that we really nailed parenting our kid, that we really nailed being what our child needed at that moment, because it's so easy to forget in the day-to-day. And I think that it does us a detriment if we can't be active in counteracting that negative bias. I think you'll really like it. It's very readable. And I think it has a really important role to play in parenting an autistic child. So they're my suggestions for this week. It's a little bit of a different episode today. I hope that, you go check those books out, have a read, see what you think, have a listen, and let me know, what do you think about the types of books, media, those kinds of things that as people doing our best to take care of autistic people, what do you think are the areas that we need to be growing in, that we need to be taking in books and media and making sure that we are growing in? There's a wealth of information out there. So I think when you're able to find a way to just narrow down to some really good sources, that can be really helpful. So I hope that that's what I've done for you today. So thank you so much for joining me. I will be back next week with a special guest. And as always, please feel free to get in contact, hello@autism360.com. And I will see you next time with a brand new topic. Bye.